Welcome back. Panel is with us. NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, civil rights attorney and former prosecutor David Henderson, the Reverend Al Sharpton, president, of course, of the National Action Network and host of Politics Nation on MSNBC, and Republican pollster Kristen Soltis Anderson. I want to start to talk about the Rittenhouse verdict, beginning with statements from both President Biden and Vice President Harris. Take a listen.
I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works, and we have to abide by it.
As many of you know, I've spent a majority of my career working to make the criminal justice system more equitable, and clearly there's a lot more work to do.
Reverend Sharpton, I heard two very different statements there. They were not necessarily as in sync as I thought they might be.
Well, I think that when you deal with the fact that, as Vice President Harris said, she has dealt with criminal justice cases directly, whereas President Biden didn't, I think that they have different views that converge at the same place. He's respecting the decision of the jury. I think the jury had to deal with bad law, and I think that you can question the prosecution and certainly the judge, who sounded in many cases like he was part of the defense team. But notwithstanding that, I think that she has a background that has dealt with a lot of this. When I was listening to the senators, both senators this morning, I think we're forgetting that the whole context of Rittenhouse coming there was around a protest of a police brutality situation. And this was not like a guy was defending himself at his house. He came to confront a situation of protest. And those kind of protests, I think Vice President Harris is familiar with. And I think that many of us that do protest, as you say, I hear National Action Network, are concerned. Do you send a signal now that people can come into a protest and exacerbate a situation or get involved in a situation and kill people and say, I was just defending myself? That's very frightening.
You know, Kristen, this is part of this divide. Is this an issue about guns, or is this an issue about social justice?
It can be a little bit of all of those things. I think it's also an issue of where people are getting their information. This is part of why you're going to see such division in this country over this case, because depending on where you get your news, there are some Americans who think everybody who attacked Kyle Rittenhouse that night was armed. And it's the case that the first man who came at him was throwing a plastic bag at him. On the other hand, there are a lot of people who would never have known from the coverage they watch that man was not there protesting police brutality in Kenosha. He was not there calling for reform of the police. He was throwing racial slurs at the protesters before he got into his confrontation with Kyle Rittenhouse. Two Americas are hearing two entirely different stories about this case, and neither of them is the full view that jury got over the days and weeks of that trial.
Kelly, I've just noticed the White House has not wanted to get so involved in any of these cases right now, whether it's the president or the vice president.
Well, I was there asking the president for his reaction. And what was also notable is he was very careful and cautious about honoring the jury system. And then later there was a written statement that came out under his name that went a little further and said that many Americans felt fear and concern and anger, myself included, meaning the president felt that as well. He didn't say that to us on camera in person. And then he went on in that written statement to again talk about wanting to tone down the divisions in the country. And that's really what he leaned heavily into there. So the White House clearly felt that they needed the president to at least echo some of the anxieties in the community and in the country about that, which the president himself did not do at that time. They want to turn down some of the divisions, and on cases like this, the president is not going to be the first one to step into the fray. And when you talk to advisors about it, they say it really is about his predecessor having been someone who would stoke some of these things. They want him to take a different position.
David, when you and I were talking on Friday in the immediate aftermath, we were talking about sort of what's going to be the fallout from this. And you pointed it, look, there's been a lot of new laws that have been written. And I want to point this out. Stand your ground laws. Not a single state had a statute, if you will, on the books before 2005 or the Stand Your Ground law. Now we have 30 states that have it. There were some that had court-ordered sort of stand your ground type of initiatives. There's 32 states that have added open carry this century. So the combination of open carry, stand your ground, you seem to think that maybe the debate about guns ought to turn into public safety. Explain.
Well, Chuck, I mean, first of all, there's an inherent conflict when you have stand your ground laws and open carry states where you've got political division. And as Reverend Sharpton has pointed out before, the modern future of civil rights is voting rights and it's police reform, both of which are not going to have any progress without activism. And now you know that when you have activism, you're going to have people showing up with guns under situations where they're volatile enough for people to begin firing. What stands out to me initially is not the existence of these laws so much as the fact that people fundamentally do not understand them. When I hear the commentary about the Rittenhouse verdict, it demonstrates for me people fundamentally do not understand the laws as it relates to self-defense. This was a winnable trial. With a different jury, you would have had a very different outcome. And
you think it was a winnable trial?
It was a winnable trial.
I think some look at the way the law's written and say, maybe it just wasn't winnable.
The law is not the problem so much as the system is the problem, and that's why we talk about systemic injustice. The system is the problem with the way this case was handled. Now, as we discuss the law, let me acknowledge outright, this was a very difficult case to win, and I said that from the beginning. Based on these facts, this was a difficult case to win. But let's think through what happened here with the law of self-defense, okay? People understand fists for some reason better than they understand guns. If I just said someone was running at me aggressively, and you asked me, so what did you do? Well, I punched him as hard as I could. Well, then what happened after that? Well, I beat him to death. What other choice did I have? That's basically what the Rittenhouse defense was. At the end of the day, you just have someone who is running at you aggressively, 5'3", never physically touches you, never physically touches your gun, which is strapped to your body, by the way. And also, the law of self-defense and stand your ground in Wisconsin actually allows the jury to consider, when you're assessing whether or not what Rittenhouse did was reasonable, the law the jury was given you allows you to consider whether or not he should have backed down.
So, Rev, what's this mean for the for your movement? What should you be fighting for when it comes to the specific issue of preventing vigilantism, if this is your concern?
I think you've got to deal with the laws. I think you need federal laws that would supersede a lot of these state laws. I think that, in a few months we're going to be facing 10 years since Trayvon Martin with the stand your ground laws became a national issue, and we never really dealt with it. We never really legislated it on a federal level. I think we must, as a movement, make the Congress and the Senate deal with new law here, because we are right now looking at the fact. We just had ministers do a big rally and prayer vigil in Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia, around the case of Ahmaud Arbery. Now I would be concerned this week of having a prayer vigil with somebody come there saying, I'm coming to defend something, and if they get in an altercation with somebody on the side, a verbal altercation, could take out a gun, AR-15 at that, and shoot somebody. So we're under real threat, so we have, in my opinion, we're mandated to try to make laws protect people that are very clear.
Kristen, it does feel as if gun rights supporters have shifted the conversation to the right, even amongst their movement, right? Gun Owners of America, in some ways, is pulled the NRA to the right. How did this become so further?
Well, I think in this environment today, you are unlikely to see, at least any state where Republicans hold any of the levers of power, a winding back of any of these laws. And that's because when you ask voters, do they feel more concerned about crime? Do they feel more concerned about their own personal safety? The answer is yes. After big shootings, after big crises, you see sales of guns go up. And so this, 2 years ago, we had talks of bipartisan criminal justice reform and these sorts of things, and we are a long ways away from where we were 2 years ago.
I'm going to assume that in about a month, we're going to all hear about gun sales and what happened after this verdict. And I have a feeling we all know which way the arrow is going to point.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.